You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast.
Hello, welcome to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Its mission and purpose is to discuss and dissect classic horror films, both old and new, and to get into the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty, the blood and guts of these films, and basically chat about why we love them so much. And this one's been a long time coming, but we're going to talk about the Evil Dead franchise. And for good reason too. It's kind of obviously been resurrected because of the resurgence of the Ash versus Evil Dead series that's currently now in the third season. But before we begin, I should probably introduce myself. I'm the lead host, Paul Farrell, and I'm joined by my co-host this week for the podcast, and a huge Evil Dead fan, I have to add, Miles Davies. Thanks for joining me, Miles.
Hi. Thanks for inviting me along to this podcast.
Look, this has been great. I mean, we've known each other for probably close to 10 odd years now. And I do remember one of our early discussions when we kind of realized that we both had a love for the dark side of cinema. The Evil Dead came up quite early in that conversation.
I think so too, actually, yeah.
I often ask this to my fellow podcasters, just about your earliest memory of the franchise itself. For this podcast, we're going to be talking about the first installment, The Evil Dead, which technically was released in 1981, but started work around 1979, if we're going to be precise, when the boys started working on it. But yeah, what was your memory of it? Like, when did it first kind of enter your sphere?
It's funny. I know the history of this film, and it pretty much started becoming successful once it hit the British VHS market.
Yes, that's right.
And because it was bought by, I'm trying to think of who it is. It's one of the Canon or one of these guys.
Oh, yeah.
Budget sort of VHS. They bought a bucket load of these horror films, basically, from the US. Yes. Or, the driving classics. And they bought this film, and my dad bought a VHS player when I was about 13, so it would have been like 1984 now. And every Saturday night we used to go down to the video store and we get a family movie and a slasher horror film. The family movie was always chosen by whoever in the family, and the slasher horror film was always chosen by my little sister, who was old at the time. So we went through the whole Tobe Hooper classics, and Friday the 13th was the very first one that we saw.
Yeah.
Never seen anything like it before.
Yeah.
And then soon enough, my dad started working on Saturdays. I think it was I want to say that no, it wouldn't have been the Falklands War. But he started working regularly on weekends.
Yeah.
So the duty of going to the video store and choosing the movies that were laid down to me.
Yes.
So, 13 years old, I rode my push bike down to the video store, and I'd heard so many things about the Evil Dead, so I was like, all right, I'll grab that, and I'll grab Gandhi.
Wow.
And that's
diversity right there.
Got home. And so the afternoon, my mum goes, what are we watching? I said, I'll put on Gandhi, and then I've got The Evil Dead. It's like a horror film. And she's like, oh, that's fine. No worries. Then my parents never had any sort of censorship issues. And we watched Gandhi, and it was like, oh, that was so good. It was an amazing story about Mahatma Gandhi.
Yeah.
Very inspiring. And then, all right, let's put on Evil Dead. Holy fuck. I've never been so scared in my entire life. I was there just going, because it was such a drastic difference.
Yes.
Between watching Gandhi and watching Evil Dead, that I didn't get the fact that it was so tongue-in-cheek.
Yes.
Years later, because I refused to watch it again. I was like, no, that's fucking freaking me out. Because it was just that the witch in the basement where she was going taunting Ash.
Oh yeah.
The shit out of me, basically. I've never seen anything like it, and so I had nightmares for 2 days afterwards. And then many years later, I was about 16, 17 years old, And my mates had this massive stoner horror movie marathon one weekend.
Yes.
Whole weekend smoking bongs and watching horror movies. And they got like Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 because that was the only ones that were out at that time. And I watched it again and I went, oh my God, I get it. It's funny.
Yeah.
And that's the second time that I actually saw it. It was like years later. It was like 3 or 4 years later. And I've loved it ever since. And I've watched it on basically, I ran down to the video store the next day and I bought it. Bought the video. I said, I want that video. And they went, oh, it never really goes out anyway. I'm like, cool, I'll buy it then. And they went, oh, we lost the cover. I don't care. I want to buy the video. And I've still got the VHS copy in my collection.
Oh, nice.
But, mate, so good.
That's an awesome story. Thanks for that, share. Look, it's weird because, like, and I guess we'll get on to this too because, we will talk about the Evil Dead 2. Oh, sorry, Evil Dead 2, I should say. But, like, for me, like, the two blurred massively together, like, and I always felt like they were one and the same. I actually went through a point where I thought Evil Dead 2, and I was young at the time, but I thought Evil Dead 2 was a remake of Evil Dead, right?
Essentially, it is.
It is, but it isn't because there is a lot of there are differences.
Yeah, so it's a continuation, but it's essentially the same.
It's the same concept movie. Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was a bit kind of like when I was a bit older that I realised they were kind of two different beasts, if that makes sense. But what was interesting, and so I was again young. I would have watched it off video as well, and I'm pretty sure it would have been at my cousin's place because that was tended to be where I watched a lot of these kind of films.
I think every British kid watched The Evil Dead in the 80s. Anybody who grew up and watched horror films or had a VHS player would have watched the Driller Killer and The Evil Dead.
Yeah, that's right. And then look, what I find really interesting. I'm going to throw this statement out too because I've often kind of pondered around this, and like people have always kind of often said, "What's the best horror franchise ever?" And most people throw up, they talk about Halloween, they talk about Friday the 13th, and all that lot because there's been so many installments of it. And for me, I think it's more a fact that the villains are iconic in that rather than the films themselves stand up. Yeah. But I like after rewatching the Evil Dead franchise just recently to prep for this record, I'm going to say it's the Evil Dead. Like for me, it is hands down the best horror franchise going. And with the season that's on,
just don't do too many of them. Don't do 8 or 9 of them.
No, that's right.
A couple of them are going to be shit.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. You're guaranteed that something's going to fall down flat.
Reinvent them all the time.
God forbid they do an Ash in space, and then that'll be it. You go, okay, you've lost it now, because that's always seems to be the go-to. Let's put them in space. Look, it's it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because that's something I want us to talk about as well. Like as we talk about each of those installments, because they do stand up for themselves as well in their own way, and that's something I noticed when I rewatched The Evil Dead. Just recently is actually how horrific it was, B, how bloody it is, just really, really full on. Like my wife kind of came in at the end of it as well, and was like, and I just said, look, this is the sort of movie that you probably wouldn't want to watch.
They got like the goriest movie I've ever made or something.
That's right.
Subline on the video cover or something.
I think you're right. I seem to remember that. Yeah. So what I can't remember which actor it was, but I remember when they went to, or it might not have been one. Oh no, it was one of the actors. It's I can't remember who it was now though, and you might be able to kind of pick me up on this one. But they were talking about when they went to the screening and he took his friend along and people were laughing along with it, and he's like, "What are you doing? Why are you laughing?" And the guy is like, "It's funny, don't you get it? Like
none of them knew what they were making.
No.
Sam Raimi knew what he was making.
No, I don't think so either.
I think Bruce Campbell must have known And easily Joel Cohen, when he was editing it, would have known.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But they were just, they were making this film. And if you read I don't know if you read the diary thing.
I did, yes. Do mention
why
it.
are you spending so long on these, zoom-in shots of inanimate objects?
Yes.
And he goes, because I need it for the film. And they're like, but you don't. This is not the way films are made. They are now.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. None of them realised what they were actually making.
No.
It's a sign of fucking genius, really. Cause,
yeah.
Sam Raimi and the Coens were so on the same page at that particular time. And you could see that their journeys have always gone parallel to each other.
Yes.
The way that their movies are styled. And Bruce Campbell is always along the way, He's skips back and forth between both lot of directors, basically.
Yeah, that's it.
Almost every single Coen Brothers film in the background, and almost every single Sam Raimi film in the background.
Yeah, that's right. It's so true. It's interesting you raised that too, and that was something I wasn't actually aware of until I was kind of looking into this about the Coen connection. But even when you look at Blood Simple as well, and if you line that as you said alongside The Evil Dead, you can kind of see that a very similar kind of style kind of working along. Obviously, Evil Dead goes with a much more kind of tongue-in-cheek approach, whereas the Coens just stripped out the comedy and went very dark.
Yeah.
Although actually, there's bits of comedy in Blood Simple, I have to add.
Yeah, but it's very slight, and that's the thing about Evil Dead as well.
Yeah.
You've got to read between the lines. You've got to know, you've got to know films.
Yes, that's true.
And that's the thing with Blood Simple and with Evil Dead. It's if you know that particular genre, know it's hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's a really, really good point you made there, because Sam Raimi lived and breathed movies when it was his ambition. He just wanted to get out there and make a film.
Yeah.
And I think that's all this stuff kind of that he was harnessing together. His vision essentially was a massive pool of these films that he just had immersed himself in over the years. He was quite young when he made this.
Like The Hills Have Eyes, you can see Last House on the Left. So many, all of that, the slasher horror movies that were coming out, he was just feeding. No, it was like a sponge, basically, that he just basically created his own sponge and threw it in.
It's so true. And with it kind of, made a real kind of, I think that's why it's such an iconic film today, and it deserves to be so, because it kind of was such a pioneer at the time, so vastly different from what people had seen. It was an awakening, if you will, in such a positive way. We should probably mention that they did do a short film prior to it as well, didn't they? They did the Within the Woods, which
that's right.
They kind of dub as a bit of a prototype, and I think it's half an hour long from memory.
I've never watched it. I've seen bits and pieces, but I haven't watched the whole film.
I think you don't necessarily need to see the whole thing, but I recommend people do, if they want to look it up, do so, because it is kind of interesting, especially if you're a fan of the franchise itself. It is kind of good to see elements of of that early beginning, the chrysalis, if you will, of what would become. It's a great kind of movie. And something else we should probably, I know we haven't really talked about the plot line of it yet, but something else we should probably talk about, one of the big reasons for the success of this film, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell and the production crew aside, and we'll get to those guys because they do deserve their mentionings. But I think one of the big things was the Stephen King review. When it was released, kind of dubbing it as one of the I haven't got the quote to hand, but kind of like one of the most scariest kind of chilling films he'd ever seen. And it was at the point where King was really at his peak. Churning out some kind of quality, his most iconic books. So he was hot property. So to have someone like him, go out and say something like that. Like that's your backing right there.
Stephen King also the same. Like a lot of his horror is laced with comedy.
Yes.
Basically, yeah, I don't know. There's always this relationship between horror and comedy that I've always loved.
Yeah, same.
And it was first introduced by reading Stephen King stuff and watching Evil Dead.
Yeah.
And it just is so immediate. The audience reactions are so immediate. People are either horrified or they're pissing themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
You never get that in a drama. People just sit there completely and utterly just silent and drama, or
yeah, that's true.
An audience reaction with comedy and with horror that you don't get in many other films.
No, that's correct, mate. That's absolutely right, and that's an interesting point that you raised with that, because it is one of those few genres that does kind of evoke a lot of emotions, in one hit. And for me, that fine line of comedy and horror is always where it's been at its best. It's kind of why I've always been drawn to the Child's Play franchise as well, the whole Chucky franchise.
Yeah.
Admittedly, there's been some crap ones in it, but as well. But like
this one, but I've seen the rest of them, and they're always kind of, you know what you're getting, and they're funny, they're smart assy, and they don't take themselves any.
No, that's right. I actually recommend watching the latest one. I have to say,
I'll have to get around to watching it. I just haven't got around to watching it yet. So
yeah, I reckon you should, because it's actually like I went to see it with Ant and another friend of ours. And like it was quite funny because there was me and the other friend were kind of laughing out loud, and was like scared shitless with it, and it's just interesting to see the difference, because like there's so many horror tropes that they were playing on, but I love that kind of stuff. I was like, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That was actually well executed. Anyway, but we're not here to talk about Chucky. We're here to talk about the world of Ash and the Evil Dead franchise. So let's talk about, so Sam Raimi, he was like, as I said, he was quite young when this, they all were really young, weren't they, when this all kind of came about?
What was he? He was straight out of uni or something, or was he still at much? So, and then he raised the money by talking to a carpet salesman or something like that, or a washing machine salesman, and then a couple of other guys, and got private funding for it, which was just genius.
Yeah.
Like, and I've seen Sam Raimi in interviews and stuff. How he talked these guys into giving them money, because he's just a weird little guy.
Yeah.
Salesman at all. It must have been Tapert. I'd say it would probably be Robert Tapert.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I keep forgetting that guy's name, but to me, he's. There's a reason he's still working in the business. Put it that way. Yeah.
Robert Tabert's married to Lucy Lawless.
Lucy Lawless, who crops up in the Ash vs. Evil Dead, which, again, I love her character of Ruby.
Great. She's so fun. And she's one of those people as well that jumped onto the Evil Dead and Sam Raimi, Robert Tapert franchise.
Yes.
Basically know exactly what they're expecting. So she just has a lot of fun with, Xena. And she started off with Xena.
That's right.
Crossed over to a bit of Hercules. Well, she was a spin-off from Hercules. And
that's right.
And then with Ash vs. Evil Dead now.
Yeah.
It has so much fun. And
you can tell that too. That's something that I think more so about the second film, and we'll get to that. But I think for me, what struck me is the camaraderie and the spirit of the making of these films. It's like you could tell that they were all having fun, and they all wanted to just make the best damn movie they could. Yeah. And that's not to say that there aren't professionals out there doing the same kind of thing, but that just really struck with me, and I think that's something that's the fun part is something that I think that's carried through the entire franchise. You can tell that they're all having
stayed working together for 40-something years.
Yeah.
I mean, amazing. Nobody has that kind of working relationship other than the Coens, and they're forced to because they're brothers.
yeah, that's right.
It's like Spielberg and Kathleen Kennedy haven't been together that long,
Yeah.
But it's just they have that relationship, and you can tell that. That's why they don't make many of the Evil Deads, because they are basically their own little bit of fun that they do, and then they go off and do their other things, and come do it, have a bit of fun with some TV stuff, and then go off. Like, I don't think they have that much to do with the Evil Dead, the actual TV series. I think it's been taken over by somebody else.
Okay.
Just EPs just to make sure that nobody fucks it up.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, I think it's a bunch of fanboys basically took that on. I think it's the guys who did Reaper.
Okay.
They took it on, and Reaper was so fucking good. Underrated TV show, one of my favorites at the time.
Yeah,
and they've just done a brilliant job with the TV franchise. But yeah, what happened with the Evil Dead 2? They basically, because they made Evil Dead 1, became successful like 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah.
On the VHS market, on the sort of video nasty market. Then De Laurentiis saw it.
Yes.
Tried to get him some studio, like some serious cash, and said, "I want more of that."
Yeah.
Remade it without remaking it, and turned it into a fucking comedy. Like, it's a genius film. Like, still like one of the greatest sequels ever made.
I agree. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when I was watching that, and again recently, I just that was the film that really is a lot stronger in my mind from when I was younger too. So obviously that one had more of the impact, and I think like the comedy element is more prominent in that movie compared to the first film.
I think it had to though, because they were going for more of a mainstream audience.
Yeah.
And I mean, it looks good because they've been given money, basically.
Yeah.
Like, not too much money, but not enough money to corrupt the film, but just enough money to actually make it fucking good.
Yes.
And they were just able to just go, you know what? I think they've been doing other stuff here and there. I think Sam Raimi did Crime Wave, I think, in that time.
That's right, he did, yeah.
And a couple other little things here and there. So they've been sort of honing their craft, and then they came back to it, and basically they were all kind of accomplished, tradespeople, basically.
Yeah. That's right.
As opposed to the like fresh-faced young uni students.
No, that's right. And that's the big kind of big thing about that film as well, is that, as I said, that comedy element that kind of comes into play.
Yeah, I got the feeling with the second one that they actually got to make the movie that they originally wanted to make.
I agree, and it's more core. Yeah, that's right. And I really love the batshit craziness of the second one, though. Like they really upped the ante of that one.
Oh, the Stooges references are just.
Oh yeah. Which reminds me, and I know I'm jumping ahead, but are you up to date on Ash versus Evil Dead?
No, I haven't watched the first episode yet.
Oh my god! Okay. And there is a line I have to tell you, but I will wait till we talk again in the next podcast. Yeah. But yeah, it's in reference to that. Cool. But the
Shemps as well. So
yes, that's right. Okay, so let's backtrack and just kind of talk about so what we should probably talk about as well is we're talking about Sam Raimi, and we kind of half mentioned Bruce Campbell, but we should kind of really mention him because a lot of the success of the first and the franchise after the fact is just how able and willing Bruce Campbell was to put his whole body on the line, and to let Sam Raimi completely just do what he wanted to him, basically, and just keep going. But he's an amazing person to watch on films. Like he really puts his whole body into it, and you really see that, and it's actually quite a cool testament to it.
Because he's a fucking nice guy.
Yeah.
I met him a couple of years ago, and I'm trying to get a bloody photo of Stan because I went to a Halloween party.
Yes.
And he was taking photos of everybody, and he was having a ball, and he was super nice to everybody, just an absolute smartass when required, just exactly what you expect.
Yeah, nice.
He knows, and if you read his books, he knows what size bread's buttered. He's not in it to become, win Oscars and do all this other shit.
Yeah.
He just wants to have fun and make movies and make money to send his kids to college.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically it, and he's been lucky enough to hook himself up with, by just the sheer fact that he's been friends with these guys.
Yeah.
Put himself up with some of the greatest filmmakers of the 80s, 90s, and 2000s.
Yes.
And so on. And so he's willing to do whatever they say, you know.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like it's
great for them. So
yes, yeah. Look, I just think he's just. I think you can't talk about the Evil Dead franchise without talking about Bruce, you know, because he's just so not because he's our character's so iconic, but he just brings so much to that character, and you know, and it's been really cool to watch that journey. I feel
it's funny though, but because you see the first film and he's not like. It's only the last part of the film that he really becomes like almost the Ash that we've all come to know.
Yes, that's right.
I mean, he's there a little cheesiness here and there, especially when he gives the necklace to his girlfriend and stuff.
Yeah. That's right.
He almost says, "Slip me some sugar, baby."
Yeah.
And then but I think it's just an example of. Like great casting, one, and the fact that they started just writing around him.
Yes.
Because he never really plays anybody other than Bruce Campbell being cheesy Bruce Campbell.
Yeah.
And he gets worse and worse and worse as he goes along.
That's right.
And that's just representative of like middle America in the 80s.
Yeah.
Horrible. They were sexist.
God, yeah.
And they loved their guns, you know. And so he's a figment now in the TV franchise. He now represents 1980s shithouse America, basically.
Yeah. That's right.
He's almost like he's not moved with the times.
No.
Even though his character's evolved over the years, it hasn't evolved. It's evolved as audiences. It's the same.
That's right.
You know, he went from, and the only evolution he ever made was from Evil Dead 1 into Evil Dead 2. Where he actually got to be a bit more animated, and you got a bit more of him just exercising his comedic facial mannerisms and shit.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like this ultra wanker, basically. If you're gonna have a guy who's going to be the only survivor of a horror movie, make him shit. Make him into a wanker. It's so good because you go, the guys have died, and there's only the twat at the end.
Well, like they look. Let's face it. There'd be no Shaun of the Dead without the Evil Dead.
Exactly.
You know, and that's a huge statement right there. You know, it's exactly.
It wasn't for the Evil Dead.
No. Exactly, and you're right. There is a case in point about Ash's character. Like if you look at the five characters essentially that find themselves at the cabin at the beginning of the film, and you wouldn't pick him to be the one that would survive. You know,
no, definitely.
You know, he comes across as a bit of a jock kind of character really at the beginning. And you definitely wouldn't have picked that the way it would have unfolded and even like, do you know what's interesting too is like the females are the ones that kind of get offed early, which was another interesting take, you know, because we're kind of left with Ash and Scotty anyway, that are the two that are kind of left at the end, and even then you're kind of thinking it's going to be Scotty, because like he ticks that box of like the all-American kind of, you know, guy. But I think that's parcel of what makes that movie as well is, you know, is the turning of the rules a little bit and the switching of the gender.
You know what it is as well? I think it's because I think it's a really anti-Reagan thing. Is that Bruce Campbell kind of looks a little bit like Reagan in his early years. And so they've kind of, you know, and Reagan just won the election to become the president around that time. Yes. He was now one of the most powerful idiots in the world. and going then on further, because you see in Fargo season 2, Bruce Campbell comes back to play Ronald Reagan.
Oh, seriously? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That season 2 is the only one I've not seen, weirdly.
He plays Ronald Reagan. Cool.
That's great. I love it.
Maybe it is, because I only just I've only just pieced that together, but it's almost like it's just a throwback to going, well, fucking Reagan won.
yeah, absolutely. So look, what I was going to say was that with that, I just want to touch on the characters actually, because we were just talking about that. So we've obviously already mentioned Ash, and we've mentioned his friend Scotty. There is important to mention two of the other female characters are a bit more kind of prominent, as in like falling into that kind of folklore, I guess, of the franchise. And one of them is obviously his girlfriend Linda, who's the first one to she's the first one to get offed, isn't she?
Yeah.
And she's often referenced within the franchise, within the series as well, or particularly in the first one, anyway. And then, but interestingly, also Ash's sister as well, Cheryl, played by Ellen Sandweiss, and she crops up in the series too, which I don't know about you, but I had this moment of yes, fucking great, because the fact that it was actually her too, the same actress.
Yeah, girlfriend came back as well, didn't she?
Who did? Sorry.
I think Linda came back, didn't she?
Was it the same actress though as well?
No, it was like a dream sequence.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. She does come back because her head's still in the
or something
in the vice. Yeah. Well, the skull's there, and then it projects her image in there. But yeah, there's lots of things that kind of tie in, which is really really cool. And then the fifth person is Scotty's girlfriend Shelley as well. But there's lots of elements that are in play with this that then become iconic. The cabin in the woods thing is probably number one. So many horror films where it's set in the woods play on that kind of whole, the whole cabin thing. You only need to look at The Ritual that came out on Netflix. Even plays on that whole kind of thing, and you can't help but think of The Evil Dead. A very different kind of beast of a film, but there's a lot of that kind of that comes into play. But I guess like the other really kind of there's a couple of really kind of iconic things that happen in the first one that set up the franchise. And number one's probably the Book of the Dead. You can't not talk about The Evil Dead without not talking about this Egyptian or Sumerian kind of version of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, I should say. Where it has the ability to kind of summon demons from the underworld, essentially, and bring them to our world. And when this all happens in the first one, it all happens with the playing of the tape recorder of this professor that kind of recorded his findings and the readings of it. And when unwittingly the five kids kind of play it, that's when this the spirits are awakened. So yeah, the Book of the Dead's a huge thing, but also the way that one of the beauties of this film is how they represent the entity with these kind of low, kind of very fast shots through the woods. All kind of POV, kind of guerrilla style shooting, which was. I think there's another reason, like, why this was such a benchmark movie. Nobody had ever kind of done that before.
Yeah, they haven't moved the camera like that before.
No, like, and like you watch it now, like people, like millennials will probably watch it and not blink twice with it because they become so accustomed to it. But for people of our generation, it was just like, what the fuck, and the camera whips through with quite.
Yeah. Well, they just basically chucked it on a surfboard.
Yeah.
And with 2 pieces of rope either side and got 2 guys to just run through the woods.
Yes.
and just go running through the woods. That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
I don't think they had... what was the first film that used Steadicam? Was that Taxi... That wasn't Taxi Driver, was it?
Hold on. That's the one with... hold on, no. Mean Streets was the one with the fixed camera, wasn't it?
Yeah. I got a feeling
it was overused, but Steadicam, I'm not sure.
I've got a feeling Steadicam was used on Taxi Driver, and that was like late 70s.
Yeah.
People were still really using it. So the fact that he moved the camera around so much was just absolutely genius. And just representing the entity was just genius. So you could
Yeah, I agree. To me, I still love that, and it's been such one of the beauties of.
It's up there with and then in music as well, where the music starts.
Yes, absolutely.
And you know that the evil dead is coming because it's here. And you go, oh fuck! And next thing the camera's just rushing through the POVs, rushing through the forest.
Yes,
towards the cabin, and I think he has fun with it in the second one as well, where the POV gets lost.
Oh, I love that bit. Yeah.
He loses Ash.
And then it goes out. That's such a great moment in that film. Yeah, that's right. That's what I'm saying. There's so many great comedy, great kind of horror moments in both these films combined. Speaking of like horrific moments, though, like one of the things that the first film became notorious for was the tree rape scene.
Yeah.
And even I think Ellen Sandbias, who plays Cheryl, who's the victim of said rape scene. Even when they were doing it, like she's actually running through the forest and she's got being ripped to shreds by left, right, and centre. And it's that one moment where the branch kind of protrudes, that is kind of such a kind of whoa moment. And to me, it's interesting. I find it really. I mean, yes, it's confronting and it's brutal. But one thing I find fascinating about it is this whole notion of almost like nature fighting back against mankind.
Yeah.
That comes into play, and it's something that they do play along in the franchise, as well. Like it does crop up in the remake, it does crop up again in the series as well, and I think that's interesting. But like the thing is, though, when I watched it, I wasn't too savvy to what was going on at the time. I think it was probably too young to kind of realize what the implications were. And it was only when I was a bit older when I was aware of the notorious nature behind it and how scandalous that was. But what were your memories of it at all? Did it?
See, I was watching it with my parents.
Yes.
And I went, what the fuck? Just
yeah.
And so for me, when I first watched it, I just kind of didn't see that. I mean, I remember my parents. I'm not going to acknowledge it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then nobody said anything. And I think even my parents are like, we've got our children in the room. I'm not saying anything.
Yes.
And it was like when I saw it for the second time when I was like 17 years old, I was like, holy fuck. You really did just go right up her. And it was I mean, that's the thing. If you're going to make one of these horror films, they're not incredibly kind to females.
No, that's right. You are right. Yes.
So it ticked a box. They could have not done it. And they had this choice in the remake as well.
Yeah.
Do they not do it? But it's become so synonymous with the franchise now.
Yeah.
They're almost compelled to do it.
Yes.
And it became one of the most talked about scenes in almost any horror film, really.
Yeah.
As far as they're concerned, as a horror movie maker, I would be thinking that was a successful thing to do.
Yeah.
As a human being watching it, I think it's wrong in just about every way.
Yeah.
It's a horror movie, so it's kind of, you're in that landscape that you know what you're getting, so you can't really complain too much.
No, that's right.
Yeah. I don't want to come off as like this like idiot that goes, yeah, it's fucking great, man. But it worked for the film.
It does. That's the thing. Like it is like we can't. It is shocking.
Yeah,
it is brutal. But as far as like the way it works within the fact that the woods kind of almost feel like they come alive and this, attacking all the senses and the physic, and it's such a physical film anyway.
Why wouldn't it do that anyway? Like if you look at the fact that it's a power play.
Yes. Yes.
They, rape is a majorly important power play on another human being.
That's right.
So the trees are nature is very sexual for a start.
Yeah.
And why wouldn't it do that?
I mean, even Ash is, one of the female characters, or at this point, what will then become known as Deadites, actually tries to force herself on him, and almost rape him in it as well. Like, there are lots of this kind of, as I say, power play that's going on. And do you know what else is kind of really quite significant about the franchise as well? Is that it takes a lot to kill these things. They are literally having to cut them to pieces, and bury them in the ground in order to kind of get them to stay there. And even we've got headless, bodies and rampaging around trying to still attack him and things like that. Because it is really brutal in that respect. And it kind of reminds me a little bit, feels like it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen the film Torn Curtain with it's the Alfred Hitchcock film with Paul Newman, and he kind of gets caught up in like a kind of like a it's playing on the whole kind of Iron Curtain, kind of essentially, like he's an American kind of guy who's in Russia, and he gets caught up in all this kind of bits and pieces going on, and he ends up kind of at some house, and there's this really kind of brutal scene where him and this woman are trying to kill this Russian agent in the kitchen, and they're doing everything they can to try and kill him, and it's one massive struggle to kind of finally overcome and kill him, and it takes all their energy, and it's almost like, to me, like it's like this is like almost like their next stepping stone up by just making it even more bloody and gory, and showing that. It's kind of it's one of the things that really struck me about the film itself. But it was without doubt became such an iconic film in its own right, and it's just a fantastic kind of entry into what they didn't know at the time would become such a huge film. I mean, we probably should mention Sam Raimi's brother's involvement too, both brothers in it as well. It was a very kind of family film as well, where they were all kind of throwing themselves into it, one behind the camera and one in front of the camera.
Ted and Ivan are in the whole series, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And they've continued working with him on other projects as well. So
yes, that's right.
I guess that's the good thing about those guys and Coens and whatnot is they're very loyal to their people. They sometimes even marry them. Joel married his first leading lady.
That's right.
It's great. They're Midwest boys who just have found themselves making feature films, and right, and they don't, they shied away from the whole Hollywood scene.
Yeah.
And they just make the shit that they want to make.
That's right. Well, it's a franchise that's essentially spawned, what is it now, two sequels, a remake, and a series.
Yeah.
It just seems to go from strength to strength. There was an article released today or yesterday from Bruce Campbell in an interview where they keep talking about this anonymous fourth Evil Dead film, potentially a crossover with the Mia character from the remake, and things like that keep coming up. And they basically just, people always ask him the same question in interviews, like, well, will we see another film? And he said, well, if the series keeps getting green lit, then the answer to that will be no. But if they decide that this next season's the last one, which they won't know until about March, mid-March or time, or end of March, when they kind of make those decisions on this series. But yeah, he basically said, like, if that's it, that's their swan song, then there is every opportunity for another film to be made. So it'd be interesting to see if they do go down that line.
Oh, look, they insinuated it by having the Bruce Campbell appear at the end of the remake.
Yeah.
I don't know why they felt the need to do that otherwise.
No, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
And I've heard talk about them teaming up before, and it's one of those things. It's almost like the whole Unbreakable trilogy series. You just hear about ages, and then something comes out, and you go, "Oh my fucking god, they did it!" That'll be what happens. It will suddenly you see a trailer.
Yeah.
It'll be on Netflix that night.
Oh, I know, that's right.
So who knows?
Yeah.
I wouldn't rule it out. I'd like to. I think that'd be great. It'd just be. I don't know. It's two different genres, really. Isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. And I kind of feel like we'll do a separate podcast on the remake anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it's awesome, but it's just
such a different beast.
There's no comedy in there.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And it's just full on as well.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, but it's full on.
Yeah, no, it is. You're right. Cool. All right. Well, look, I think that's probably it for the first film. So if we then kind of move to the second film, and more around that.
Oh, we've kind of been talking about the second.
We have, but just to kind of I guess kind of shine a bit more light on the second one. It was proper title is Evil Dead 2: Dead by Dawn.
Yeah.
It came out in 1987, so like 6 years, and you mentioned that already, but 6 years after the fact for the first one, which and it, again, accumulated such a huge cult following in its own right. Again, it's just really interesting. But like Doug said, like there was a lot of confusion about how, and I fell into that category, as I said before, about was it a remake? Was it a whole new film? And there were, I was watching one of the documentaries where they were talking about it, and they were saying how because they didn't have the rights to the footage of the first film, so they had to kind of almost reshoot bits of it. But some people, when they were watching it, thought, how dumb is this Ash guy that he goes back to this cabin with his girlfriend, to reawaken this kind of these spirits, not realizing that these are like just reshot flashbacks, essentially.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of confusion around that. But I think the big thing about this film is the fact, and we've already mentioned this, but that they really just upped the ante. And I felt like, they were finally, as you said, able to make the film they wanted to make. Which is kind of a kind of really kind of cool vision there. And this is also where we get the iconic, chainsaw hand.
Oh, yeah.
He chops off his own hand, and you get the whole kind of, almost like the Thing from the Addams Family kind of thing going on. But yeah, it's just like things like that. There's so, and like you mentioned about, the entity kind of chasing after Ash through the corridors and losing him, and there's these things, little ticks that kind of start happening with this that just raise the bar from its predecessor and kind of made it such an iconic film in its own right. Even like I found like things that were really interesting about this film as well. Is like Sarah Berry, who plays the professor's daughter Annie. Actually was called in to was cast as a Bobby Joe, and got the part, but she wanted the part for Annie and read for that, and Sam went, actually, yeah, okay, you've got it, which is kind of cool. And the introduction of claymation and stop animation in this as well was genius. I'm such a huge fan of stop animation.
Yeah.
Anyway, but that just kind of cemented it even more for me of like this kind of really kooky beast of a film that it became. you know, and things like that were just really, really cool. And I think even but the special effects team in the film as well were just, and like you watch some of the, and you got to watch people out there who haven't caught it yet. You got to watch some of they had their own camera, were shooting stuff as well and reenacting bits and pieces of the movie to kind of make sure these effects and stuff, and it's available. You can watch this stuff as well, and it's I think it's pretty cool insights into the making of that film. But again, more importantly, I think it strikes of how the camaraderie again and the easygoing kind of fun nature. They were kind of left to almost to their own devices to kind of create these beasts and to kind of really be quite experimental with it.
It's though, isn't it? Because I've heard stories about De Laurentiis, and I've heard stories that he was quite a bit of a megalomaniac, control freak.
Yeah.
And yet they were able to just go, fuck it, you know. And it must have been like, they mustn't have been given that much money. They must have been, I don't know what the budget was on the film.
No.
They must have been given just enough for him to just go, fuck it, you know.
Yeah.
And trust them enough to let him make more of the same of what they did in the first place. So,
well, yeah, I mean, like he must. I think part of it is because he recognised that these were a bunch of guys that, because of their nature and their filmmaking nature as well, is that they were actually able to create something that was very different, which had a pulse to it, and more importantly,
as well,
had a huge following, like from uni crowds, essentially.
Because I imagine that they represent quite a tight unit.
Yeah.
A bunch of people have continued being, you know, this is since the original concept in 1979.
Yeah.
It's like 8 years on, and they're still all best friends and working together and stuff.
Yes.
Get this thing made. So the fact that they've got the dogged determination to stick together and keep going, I don't know how many groups that would do that.
No, that's right.
Mm. So I guess that's must have been what they represented to Laurentiis. And
yeah.
Freedom enough to go, you know, fuck it. Just so it's interesting.
It is. I think so. Like, I mean, like, I recommend anyone kind of watch some of the behind the scenes stuff that's available out there, because to me, it inspires me, you know, to kind of see how they all kind of banded together. Like, you know, they were all kind of helping each other out and creating these creatures and really trying to push themselves as well. And I think that's what comes through in the film as well.
I think there's still quite a lot of the cast though that kind of didn't quite get what they were making.
No,
went on into Army of Darkness as well. Like I've got, I think it's called Medieval Days. It's a documentary about Army of Darkness, and they have Embeth Davids, and she's just like,
oh yeah.
They just keep referring to her as she just did not get what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
He just went from that to Schindler's List.
I know.
And it's just, and they're all like a complete bunch of goofballs who are having fun making a schlocky horror film.
Yeah.
Horror comedy film, and she's this professional actress basically who's trying to hone her craft before hitting the big time. And there's I think there's a lot of that in the second one where you get the impression that they're all just in it and they're just having a bit of fun.
Yes.
And, some of them get it, some of them don't, some of them would never get it, and some of them would just run completely and utterly on the same page. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It is. It really is, and I think it lends weight to. I think the reason I stress it so much is because for me, it's this movie that cemented the franchise into kind of legacy status, because it just that freedom to kind of create that kind of playing on the comedy, up in that ante with the comedy and the blood and the gore, really kind of made it such a an iconic film, and it's weird that you say that with a sequel, that it can stand head and shoulders alongside its predecessor. You know, and this movie does that, and I think that's such a rare thing to see.
I think up there with Godfather 2 and Empire as being one of the greatest sequels. And you know, it takes artistic license because it references the first one, but it doesn't actually jump off as a complete sequel because the second one, it's just him and Linda that go up into the woods.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
There's no reference to, you know, his sister or brother or best friend or whatever.
No, that's right. Yeah.
And they never really get referenced again until the TV series.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things where they just go, you know what, we're just not going to worry about that. We'll just tell them.
Yeah.
And it's great. I mean, even in Army of Darkness, they changed the actor completely. They made it Bridget Fonda because she begged to be in the film.
Yeah, that's right. So,
that
very kind of short moment, isn't it? It's cool. I mean, like that. So, like, yeah, there's lots of kind of different avenues it takes with this one, you know, this film as well. And I still feel like the stop animation dance, you know, the dance sequence, the disembodied head bit is still kind of, to me, one of the most visually.
It's like a nod to Ray Harryhausen. It's just
and I loved Ray Harryhausen stuff as a kid, like, you know, all the kind of Clash of the Titans stuff. I was a huge fan of that anyway. So as a horror fan that I then became, and seeing this kind of nod to him in it, just kind of, to me, elevated this movie higher up even more. It's such a cool moment.
I think Evil Dead 2 is probably I think I've seen that more than any of the other ones.
I think I have too, yeah.
Because it's one of those ones that, I mean, the first one is a bit rough around the edges and has its slow moments as well as its like balls to the wall moments.
Yeah.
And then the third one is just very, very cheesy.
Yes.
But it just strikes the middle ground of just being dead on, basically.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. And I think I can watch this over and over again until the day I die, basically.
Yeah. But like what strikes me about the second one as well is how mania becomes such a prominent figure within it. This whole sense of insanity and delusions and things really comes to the foreground, and I think it's done in such a cool way, you know. And again, that a lot of that testament is the way that Bruce Campbell is able to kind of strike those poses and those facial expressions and, you know, play along it. But yeah, you know, it's like, you know, the whole kind of sense of anarchy, I guess, that's on display really kind of is a centerpiece for this film. And it adds to that kind of whole craziness that's going on, and this kind of almost what am I trying to say? It's almost this it feels like it's a free-flowing wild beast in its delivery, which lends weight to this kind of, you know, the sheer absurdity of the situation that Ash finds himself in. And it sets the tone for what would then become the franchise in itself. And then to throw in one of the craziest cliffhangers ever. Ever on film.
Which revisited until 4 years later or something.
Yeah. That's right. By just plonking him in like the Middle Ages essentially.
Yeah. And it came out with a completely different name. It was called Army of Darkness. It wasn't even Evil Dead whatsoever. So
no, that's right. Dropping that as well was an interesting one. But I guess we'll talk about that when we come to talk about the next podcast. But yeah, like, you know, as I said, like, you know, there's so many great moments within that, and I think it's
the first half of it is my favorite because it's just Bruce Campbell.
Yes,
and it's the other doofuses coming to the cabin and stuff, but it's literally just Bruce Campbell.
Yeah,
holding his own for 4 days in the cabin somewhere.
Yeah,
just been haunted and tortured by himself and by the demons, basically.
Yeah.
And it's just genius, and it's just testament to his acting.
Absolutely.
Ability as well. It just balls to the wall, basically.
Yeah. I'm really glad you mentioned that, actually. Yeah, because that is a really, really good point raised, because he is holding that film for that first half of the movie. And again, a testament to him as an actor, a testament to his ability to kind of push himself to the limits, of all the things that Ash is put through as well. But again, I think that's another reason why it cements him as his character. Can you name another survivor other than Laurie Strode or Ellen Ripley that is as iconic, in that kind of genre?
No.
Probably not. And it's
the female ones seem to be more iconic than the male ones.
Yeah.
Most of the time, it's because most horror movies the only person that survives is a female.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's one of the few male soul survivors. And it's weird, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. No, it really is.
I mean, they've fully embraced that with this one and the third one is that it's not just the Evil Dead story; it's Ash's story as well. So and they fully embraced it with the TV series where he's Ash versus the Evil Dead.
Yes, that's right.
So I guess these days you can't really have the Evil Dead without Ash. If that appears, you had the remake and stuff.
Yeah.
It was almost like a distant cousin.
No, that's right. So, yeah, definitely. Cool. Right. So, speaking of which, so I'm feeling like we're coming to the end of our discussions on Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. I feel like there was a reason I kind of wanted to couple these two together, because they do kind of sit kind of almost hand in hand alongside each other. Whereas when you get to Army of Darkness, it's a very different beast.
Yeah.
And then, the remake is a completely different beast in itself as well. And I'd like us to have a chat about that in our next podcast discussions. But is there anything else you kind of want me to add or would like to add about the first two films that we might not have touched on before we sign off?
I can't think of anything.
No.
We touched on the whole... Yeah, the fact that most of us discovered it because it was thanks to the invention of VHS tapes and video.
Yeah.
Stuff. And I don't think it would have been half as successful if it wasn't for those. So I think it was part of the success was the timing.
Yeah, absolutely. And so actually, maybe this is a good way to kind of sign off or decide.
Palace Video picked up.
Palace, yes. Yeah. But maybe that's a good end topic before we sign off for the podcast is, there's so many of these films that are like the early 80s essentially to just about the mid 80s that were coming out. We've mentioned Halloween and your Friday the 13th, but throwing there your sleepaway camps and the Burning as well.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that's on the fringe kind of side of things that still kind of walks along. Yeah, that's right. Which basically they basically were your kind of video entertainment kind of movies. Do you ever think that so many like filmmakers now and even the mumble gore movement kind of are play on or nod to those kind of those.
I'm a huge fan of the mumble gore guy.
Yeah.
I talk to Simon Barrett like every other day on Twitter. So
yes.
And they're just they wear their influences on their sleeve. They're fully influenced by all of the 80s because they're all our age, basically. So,
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All of their influences are what we're influenced by, which is 1980s slasher horror films. And they started with it was Ty West did House of the Devil and that's actually literally set in the 80s.
Yes. That's right.
So you can see that movement is has been incredibly influential on.
Yeah.
I don't think we'd have Mumblegore without the 80s.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I guess my question was going to be like, there's a lot of horror filmmakers or just filmmakers in general that were so influenced by the 80s video home entertainment scene. But it's such an iconic time period. But do you ever think that we could ever rekindle that in its true sense? Like, will we ever get another?
Well,
I don't think we will, but
for the first time, we had access to movies on demand, basically.
Yeah.
On demand. So that was a massive influence because we had to settle with stuff that was actually on TV.
Yes.
And all of that stuff that was on TV was heavily censored because it was either on BBC or ITV.
That's right, yeah.
So we never saw any of the horror films and stuff.
Yeah.
And all we saw was safe family shit.
Yep.
1940s. Anything by David Lean and anything Will Hay or...
yes.
So, yes. I love those films as well. I have such a
me too.
Those films as well. But the first time we were able to see stuff that never made it on the TV because it was wrong. Yeah. And so, we all devoured it. Now there's a lot more mediums that are producing that stuff. So you've got Netflix, you've got Stan, you've got all these massive on-demand distribution agents. That you can get any movie that you want now at the as soon as they're ready to release it, basically. And sometimes that it gets released everywhere around the world. And my son, he's 7 years old. He has more of a film vocabulary, and he's seen more films now than I had when I was twice his age.
Yeah. It's so true.
And he's seen them multiple times as well.
Yeah.
Everything, like his dad's a gadget fan. His dad's got all the streaming services.
Yeah.
Plus, I like to download here and there. And so he sees everything, anything that comes out, he sees.
Yeah.
And I said, so what do you want to do when you grow up? And he goes, I want to make films and want to make TV. He will go into it with such a vast referential knowledge that the kids in about 20 years' time doing some of the most amazing shit.
Yeah. It's true.
Just about everything along the way. All the 90s onwards. Like, I try and show them stuff from the 80s as well. Like, trying to show them stuff from earlier on. It's very hard. You have to just stick to Disney usually around that stage.
Yeah.
I try and show them, like, the Goonies and
yes, of course. And
all of the Spielberg stuff and Dark Crystal and Labyrinth and Neverending Story and stuff. But it's his film knowledge and his friends' film knowledge is just amazing. They're just all they're watching is like stuff on their screens, basically.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's home movies made by people. Which,
right, yeah.
At the moment,
well, that's a lot of stuff that you look at the stuff that's on YouTube and what's accessible.
But
people are making them.
That's all made by their parents, though.
Yeah.
Parents that are in videos, and they've all got fucking no filmic education whatsoever. So,
no,
like their kids are going to grow up going, "Dude, you so did not know what you were doing." Amazing viewer content that you're ever going to see. I'm quite excited to see what comes out over the next 20 years.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good time. It definitely is a good time. We're seeing a lot of cool things coming through the mix.
All these like great cameras and shit. So
yeah, man. Like the more insane that goes, the more advanced our technology becomes, the more interesting things will become. It's going to be a really, really cool time. All right. Well, look, I think that's probably us for our Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 podcast discussion. Just once again, like to say thank you to you for joining me on this discussion, Miles.
Thank you.
And as always, I'm your host, Paul Farrell. And until next time, just get out there and start making crazy shit, guys. We want to see it. Thanks again, and thanks for listening. Goodbye.
You're listening to the Surgeons of Horror podcast. Music supplied by Peter Nezik. For more discussions or podcasts, head over to surgeonsofhorror.com or head over to our Facebook and Twitter sites for the latest news and updates.